Can we normalize talking about things as our favorite instead of the best? I'm bringing this up because it's Oscar weekend, and as somebody who loves movies, people expect me to care, and I don't. I don't object to the idea of an award, of recognizing quality in the arts. It's the modern award show structure that I do not like. Now, some people might think it's because I object to being force-fed speeches on morality from people who flew in on private planes and wouldn't look at the bottom of their shoe if they stepped on our face in the middle of the street. But it's less about that, and more because I just don't like the culture that seems to arise when you call something the best. Tell me, how do you qualify something like that? What makes a work of art the best? If you buy a lottery scratch ticket, for example, it might tell you there are, say, 500 ways to win. And the best way to win, objectively, is the way that gets you the most money. But if you watch 500 movies, how do you decide which one is the best? We can all agree that $1,000 is more money than $100. That's just basic math. But we can and will have different opinions about what makes a good screenplay, a good musical composition, a good performance by an actor. It bothers me because calling something the best implies some sort of objective measurement that simply doesn't exist. There's no ruler, no scale, no way to quantify it. Best Picture at the Academy Awards is just a consensus among a relatively small group of people who vote on those particular awards, most of whom probably pretend to like kale. I have the same problem with Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, especially when somebody tries to use a Rotten Tomatoes score as if it's some sort of objective measurement of quality. It's not, despite the fact that Rotten Tomatoes has the audacity to claim that it is. It's just a metric to measure a consensus. And even if 99% of the critics agree that a movie is good, that doesn't automatically mean that I'm going to think it's good. I will say, however, that I've found that in most cases where there's an enormous gulf between the critic score and the audience score, whether it's in either direction, more often than not, I agree with the audience score. This is why I prefer talking about my favorite movies, TV shows, music, any kind of piece of creative expression. Favorite is, by implication, a personal choice, a private assessment. Here's a quick dramatization to demonstrate that point using the finest actors I could afford. The Fabelmans is Steven Spielberg's best movie. Really, dude? You're saying that The Fabelmans is better than Raiders of the Lost Ark, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Jaws? Are you out of your mind? You're ugly and your mama dresses you funny. We are literally wearing exactly the same clothes. And now people are fighting. Favorite, though, has a different connotation. The Fabelmans is my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. Really? Why do you like it so much? Well, the story of a young filmmaker navigating his own family drama and fueling that into a love of movies is something that's very personal to me. It has more personal meaning than any other movie I can think of that I've ever seen. Okay, I guess I can see that. I still like Jaws better, though. You're ugly and your mama dresses you funny. What? Why would you do that? Now it's turned into a conversation, and I prefer a conversation to an argument every time. Even if it were possible to objectively measure the quality of a movie and declare one of them the best picture, by doing so, you're implying that you've seen every possible example from that group. And you have not seen every movie of the year. It's impossible. Let's use 2020 as an example, the pandemic year, a year when releases were slightly down. Letterboxd still lists over 39,000 movies released that year. Admittedly, not all of these are eligible for the Oscars. This number includes TV movies, miniseries, and lots of other things that are not up for Oscar consideration. But even if it's only 10%, that still leaves 4,000 movies. Nobody has seen them all. So really, when you're saying that something is best, you mean to say the best of the ones I've seen. The same thing goes for the Razzies, by the way, the group that awards the worst movies of the year, but I like them even less because they're just an exercise in mean-spiritedness. Remember, this is the group that invented a special category to mock Bruce Willis movies just to be, funny, I guess. And then they retracted that entire category very quickly when it came out that the reason Bruce Willis was making so many movies is because he had a degenerative brain condition and wanted to take any job he could and save up money for his family before he couldn't work anymore. Hey, Razzie folks, maybe just don't be assholes in the first place. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences declared that Nomadland was the best movie of 2020. And it might be, I don't know. I haven't seen it. And I'm willing to bet that most of the people watching this video haven't seen it either. In fact, I bet most of you don't even remember that it won. So when you hear someone say Nomadland was the best picture, the kindest response you'll get a lot of the time is, I guess. That said, my favorite movie of 2020 is also something I bet most of you have never watched, probably have never heard of. It's called Scare Me. It was written and directed by Josh Rubin, and it stars Rubin and Aya Cash as a pair of writers who are strangers to each other but wind up stuck together after a power outage ruins their retreat in some cabins in the mountains. They decide to pass the time waiting for the power to come back on by telling each other scary stories. Almost the entire movie is just these two sitting in a cabin talking to each other, but it's absolutely mesmerizing. The writing is smart and crisp, the performances are funny and compelling, and again, I like it personally because I very much relate to this whole notion of writers, or any creative types, who have this sort of personal bond over the creative process. Rubin also understands that the membrane between horror and comedy is very thin, and he uses that to his advantage. The movie is very funny, it's very creepy, and it moves between the two flawlessly. Can I say that Scare Me was the best movie that came out in 2020? Absolutely not. But can I say that it was my favorite of the 84 movies from that year that I have seen? I absolutely can. And now that I've told you why it's my favorite, I bet that at least a couple of you are wondering where you can watch it. The answer, by the way, is Shudder, Hoopla, or AMC+. By the way, there were actually 2 movies with that same title that came out that year, so make sure you're getting the right one. Scare Me by Josh Rubin. So let's start normalizing talking about favorites instead of best. I always try to do that, although I admit I slip up sometimes. So if you ever hear me call something the best of a creative endeavor, know that I actually mean favorite. Because of the two, favorite makes for a more productive conversation. It's more personal, it's more defensible, and honestly, it's more fun.